Hey there, this is Manisha Kadagatur for Tell It Like It Is. Thank you for all the feedback you've sent me for the last episode. You can now leave a voice message with your feedback by going to anchor.fm/manisha-kadagatur/message and recording your message, and I'll try and include it in a future podcast. That's anchor.fm/manisha-kadagatur/message. My guest today is Navin Mittal, a passionate brewer and the co founder and partner at the Gateway Brewing Company in Mumbai, one of a few resto-bars which serve great beer and terrific food. This is not surprising because Naveen is a foodie who loves to cook as well. You can catch his experiments with beer on indianbeergeek.com. Let's dive in. Hey Naveen, how have you been?
All good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you today on this podcast. And I'd just like to jump in with the first question, which is why beer? And what's so special about it? And is this your first venture?
Well, why beer? What's so special? First venture, too many questions all thrown in together, but let me address them. Why beer? Some say that man got civilized because he wanted to drink beer. So if you go back in time, probably 6,000 years ago, right? There's this catch-22. Did man cultivate grain to make bread, or did he cultivate grain to make beer? So that question has still not been answered. But we beer lovers believe that we got civilized and started growing grains to make beers. So for me, beer has always been a drink of choice, right from the college days and perhaps, last year of school till, date. And all the while through college, the only beer I had was, the yellow liquid which you get in the bottle, right? And we all thought, that's the beer, that's the end all and be all of what a beer could be and should be. And that was fine, and that's what you got in the market. But I was in the US in between 2000 and 2003, and while studying there and working for a Fortune 100 company, I came across various types of beers, and I didn't quite pay a whole lot of attention to them. I just went and got the regular yellow beers, which were Amstel and Budweiser. But I also picked up Sam Adams and Sierra Nevada, and a couple of other brands. And those beers were distinctly, different. They had, they were richer, they were more flavorful, some were more bitter, some were very refreshing. And I kind of started liking those beers. But once again, I never paid any heed to them. I came back to India in 2003 to join my, so-called family business. We also own Shadi.com, and I came back to start the website, which would kind of look at the dating aspect of the youth. And during that time, I couldn't find any other beer to have except for, the good old Kingfisher. And there were a few imports which were available, but they were costly. So every time somebody went abroad, I used to tell them, hey, can you get me a six pack of, Hoo Garden or a Leffe or a Sam Adams? And they used to laugh, and they used to say, what nonsense. People ask for single malt Scotch whiskey and you're asking us to get beer. But
Absolutely.
nonetheless, yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it? And my few of my friends got me those beers, and my brother-in-law stays in Belgium, so he used to get me the beers. And obviously, they couldn't carry more than six or probably 12 of them. And I would probably finish it in two or three sittings, during the week. So one day I was having this, beer which was on the last few bottles I had left off. And I was wondering, what is this beer and where it comes from? Where does it come from? A lot of people, don't know where the products come from. Somebody chicken curry, where did the chicken come from? It came from nature's basket. Kind of draw the line over there, right? Or if you ask somebody, what is coffee? Where does coffee come from? Or, where does tea come from? So they say the tea leaves, but then they look
Darjeeling.
Daniel,
That answer
Darjeeling,
we
yeah,
got.
Darjeeling, right? So I went online and I searched on Google, what is beer and how is it made, and I came across a whole lot of articles. And to simplify things, it was basically beer is made by crushing, barley malt, soaking it in water, draining that water, boiling it, adding yeast, fermenting, and beer is ready. And I also found that over 1 million people make beer at home in the United States. So that was extremely fascinating. So this was in 2005, 2006. I kind of started reading all I could about beer, and I said, if they can do it, there should be, valid enough reason for me to try it out and perhaps be successful at it. But there were, huge challenges. Getting malt in India, there was no homebrew culture over here. There were no small shops selling you, various ingredients and equipment which you could use to make beer. So, I just kept reading, and basis that I was able to, make my small equipment which I would need to make beer. And I wrote to large companies who sell, malt by the truckloads and asked them to give me 5 kilos. A lot of them did not even bother to reply, but there's one company who used to send me, 5 kilos at a time. And using that, I started kind of making beer at home, and I started a blog called, Indian Beer Geek. And, I kind of read so much and I became so passionate about the product that within about 4 years or so, I'd kind of become, an expert. I could kind of look at a beer and I could say, I can create a recipe for this beer probably in one try or two tries. So
Now
during
that's
this
interesting.
time,
Hang on.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
interesting. So you're saying that so one is to enjoy beer and the other
right.
one is to actually taste it and
Hmm.
actually distill the ingredients
Right.
and talk about all of them. Now that's a very evolved palate. How did that happen?
So that happens when you go nuts over something, right? So you read a whole lot and you start making. So for example, if you make eggs every day, twice a day
Right.
make eggs for 365 days, right?
Right.
And when somebody else is making an egg or somebody gives you an egg dish, right? You can tell what is wrong, what is right, or how to make that dish, right? It's like a chef, right? They get trained, in cooking for years on end, and when they taste a dish, they're able to tell the texture, they're able to tell the flavor, they're able to tell the ingredients, and they're able to a large extent, recreate that dish maybe in one or two tries, right? So after having brewed, batch upon batch upon batch from 2006 until today also, right? I could, in 2010, 11, I could look at a beer and I could tell, what kind of grains would give me the color, what kind of grains would give me the flavor, what kind of yeast would give me the character I'm looking for in this beer. And I just, kept on doing it. And I kept writing on my blog also. And through my blog, I met two people. One was Rahul Mehra, and he wrote to me saying that, hey, Navin, teach me how to brew. I've seen your blog, and perhaps we could do something together. So I taught him how to brew. During that time, I went to Brew Lab in the UK just to do a formal course in brewing. By then, I'd known everything, but the cultural immersion I got over there was fabulous. And so Rahul and I started brewing together. Then another person got in touch with me through, he was in Sydney, and he was also a home brewer, and he was coming back to India, Krishna Nayak. So three of us then got together, wrote a business plan, and then kind of got this business started. So
Wow.
that's the whole journey. I can elaborate a lot more about how and where and what, but in a nutshell, this is how my love for beer, and the passion for making it got me to start this particular business. There were two more
Wow.
fragments to this question, right? So if you could repeat those, I'll address those as well.
So I had asked what's special about it. So you've told me about the love of beer.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I suspect there are many more stories over there that you're going to share
yeah,
with me. And
yeah.
also, this was your first venture.
Not really. This is not my first venture. Uh, I'm 47 years old and I've been working since the age of, I think, 16, if I'm not mistaken. And so I've been through quite a few businesses, but one common theme amongst all these businesses has been product development. So I've always been the product sort, the creative sort, the person who likes to dabble, be creative, innovative, and make something which is relevant to the consumer. For example, my first business was making, these coloring material which was used for dyeing jeans. So we used to
Right.
supply these colors to, the Levi's manufacturers and so on and so forth. And I used to come up with different shades and names for these, colors, and I used to be responsible for the product sales and education of the end user. So from there, I went on to do my MBA in the US, and I was responsible for developing the enterprise-wide travel and expense software. So I did that, and I was making another product. That's when I left and I came back to India. And then I conceived, an Indian dating website called Fropper.com, Fropper being short for Friend Hopper, which is part of the whole Shadi.com family. And that also was a lot of innovation, creativity, subscription models. This is in 2006, 2008. I'm talking about mobile websites and stuff. And post that, I got into arbitrage of gold and oil. Luckily, I didn't lose any money there, but never made any money over there as well. And then finally, at the moment, I'm in making beer, innovating different styles, different tastes, flavors, and continuing what I love to do.
I can't even draw like a like a theme over here, except for love of product development and tech, right?
No, so
Um,
I'll tell you the theme. The theme is very simple. The theme is if you have to make a living, right,
right.
you either get a job, correct?
Yeah.
And that's what I'd done when I was in the US. I was with Analog Devices. I had a job. And within about a year and a half, I was like, listen, I need to go back to India and do my own thing.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
then
if you're
I
doing
came
expense
back.
websites, then sure. Yeah. Matlab, travel reimbursement.
Yeah. So, well, it was an enterprise-wide project, 250,000 people using it. That was, fun stuff while it lasted. So then I came back and I said, I need to start something on my own. And prior to that also, we're a business family. My father was running, textile mills and he started his own and all that stuff. So I guess it is fear of failure or desperation to do something to earn a living. That drives you, right? Yeah, you have to fill your pockets somewhere or the other.
Completely. I get that. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, let's jump into the more exciting part of what you do right now, right?
right.
Um, Now, anyone who, I mean, during the lockdown, now most people have become home chefs and, master chefs and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
any sort of cooking, any sort
Hmm.
of baking, and
Hmm.
I would think home brewing also is a
Hmm.
mix of chemistry and creativity. So
Absolutely.
understanding how various things sort of relate with each other and stuff like that, right?
Right.
Um, how do you balance that out? Were you good at chemistry? Does that come naturally to you, or how does
I
that
was
happen?
I was I was horrible at chemistry, right? And I don't say that the subject is difficult or the subject is not exciting. I blame it on the teachers fairly and squarely, right? My teacher who taught me in school would probably get really upset if she was around. But I blame it on the teacher. They made it bloody boring as hell. They made us by heart the periodic table, and it was absolutely shit.
I
So,
agree, man.
it's just, but there are nutcases who will kind of buy at everything and love all the balancing of the equations and stuff. So leave those folks alone. Like I said, my first job was, selling these dyeing coloring matter, to various jeans manufacturers, right? Now, that itself was a very chemically involved product. And my dad's background has been weaving and textile processing. So just by growing up, we knew how fabric was made. I could touch a fabric and say, this is polyester, this is viscose, or this is cotton. I knew what WAP and weft were, and I knew how to do those calculations just because my dad did all those things, right? So immediately when we started, my dad came up with this idea to sell dyeing and coloring matter. I dove into certain books to figure out the practical uses and the practical usage of those dyes to kind of color and derive different shades in your jeans. So yes, it was, a little bit of chemical interaction and understanding, but you never had to get into the depth of it. For example, you use a mobile phone, but do you know
Right,
how the network behind it works? You don't need to know the network behind it, right? You just need to know how the phone works, how the touch interface works, or how an app works. So similarly, you have to just dig, I think, probably two levels, and you should be able to kind of figure things out. So that was my first foray into something, deeper than what other casual people would do. From there, like I told you, I was in the US doing tech. Now, my master's in e-commerce and marketing. I'm not a
mm,
tech person, but in 2000, the market had turned, and I was hired in the marketing department and put in the coding department, right? So it was a cliche, right? Indian coding to आता होएगा इसको coding में डाल दो right? So I had never touched coding. I had never had any idea what coding was. But it can't be rocket science. So I picked up a book and I kind of went through. And I realized that yes, if you put your mind to it, it's simple enough because what we do is high level coding. We don't do machine language coding, right?
yeah,
All these Microsofts of the world have kind of developed languages that you can understand and write. And
right.
everything else is done by the software of the application interface to translate it into machine language, right? So I did all of that. And by doing all of that, I also understood the consumer side, as in the interaction of the software with the consumer, the front face, right? And that helped me start the dating website over here.
Wow.
Right. So
Wow.
now that led to another, one thing led to the other. And immediately when I read about beer and how beer is made, cooking comes to people when they go and study abroad and live alone, especially as Indians, right?
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
totally.
I never cooked in my life. I went there and it was like, cereal boxes and milk. The best I could do was buy bread and buy cold cuts and buy cheese and sandwiches were ready. But then we used to have this desperation for chana masala and rice, or we used to want to have pav bhaji, or for that matter paratha. So we had to figure out how to make this nonsenses, once in a week or once in a month. So, made a little bit of this and came back to India and, started dabbling into cooking when I became 120 kilos and I wanted to drop weight. So I got into whole primal paleo and I started eating, a lot of meat, a lot of fat, natural produce, and started cooking for the whole family at home.
Wow.
Right? So from breakfast to lunches to dinner, so all that cooking happened, and I read a lot about cooking and got fascinated by it. And to date, a lot of recipes at home, are made by the cook, but obviously tweaked by us. Or if something is amiss, I go fix that. So I think there's a natural tendency for people, there are certain types of people who like to, be creative, who like to dabble, a few inches below the surface and, make their own or figure out things on their own.
That's very intense, huh? Um, it is.
Well,
I mean,
I've taken to baking also recently. In those last 3 months, all I've done is a whole lot of
you,
baking.
don't tell me you've made banana bread.
No, I make sourdough, and I make sourdoughs to die for.
Kya baat hai.
If
Very
you see
nice. Now
the
I
photo, you'll say, "Abhi bech do, abhi dukaan khol do aap."
now I know that the Gateway Brewing Company
Yes,
and the Gateway Tap Room, the
yes,
Gateway Tap Room in particular, has
uh,
fantastic beer, obviously brewed by you,
yeah,
and great food. Now
right,
that's not very common in most
hmm,
resto pubs because it's
right,
all about drinking a lot, getting smashed, and passing out sort of a thing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
here it's so much about the food as well.
hmm,
So tell me a little bit about how you made. So two questions here. How did you make this transition from this home brewing to doing
hmm,
it at a commercial stage?
hmm.
And how did you blend in this whole love for food with your restaurant?
Okay, so I'll touch upon how did I go from a home brewer to a commercial brewer, right?
Right.
So, if you read about the top brands in the United States, one of them is Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
And most of the home breweries in the United States, most of the brewers, craft breweries in the United States, a large percentage of them have been home brewers.
Mhm.
So this is the general trend. You start with home brewing because you love beer, and then you ruin your life by making beer and saying, I want to make this into a business,
This is sort of
right?
like the airline business, start as a billionaire and become a millionaire sort of a thing.
Yeah,
Is that it?
something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
something like that, right? Or it says, no, teach a man how to fish and he'll eat for life. Teach a
Yeah.
man how to make beer and you ruin his life.
Oh, really? Wow, that's a nice one.
Because you go crazy, right? You can't stop making beer. It's not about drinking copious amounts. It's about the variety. It's about the creativity. It's about the excitement of opening a new brew which you've made and sharing with friends and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So I think I lost the question. You say, okay, how did I transition? So a lot of people, a lot of home brewers, have transitioned into commercial breweries. And I was at a point where, the meltdown had happened in 2008, 2009, if you remember,
Yeah.
right? So I was in Shadi.com running the dating website and stuff. And I kind of moved on from there and I said I will get into money management, get into arbitrage, a completely different field. So I did that for a good 2.5 years. But the good thing was in the background, I was always making beer at home.
Okay.
And I always had the pulse on the industry, what's happening abroad, what's going on in the US, what's happening in India. So in India by then, there were some breweries in Bangalore, there was one in Pune, there were a few in Gurgaon. So I felt, that I think this is the right time for us, for me at least, to make this a commercial venture, right?
Mhm.
Now, how do you go about doing this? I've never set up an industry. We were doing internet and internet is everything online, right? So how do you go about doing this? So we had no clue. So we wrote a letter to the Minister of Excise. that
Mhm.
gentlemen or sirs, we want to start a brewery. What do we do? We didn't expect any reply, but in 15 days, we got a reply to come and meet the Minister of Excise, right? So Rahul and myself got really excited and we went there. And the minister gave us about 30 seconds after waiting for about 3, 4 hours. But the good thing he did was he called up the excise department and said, "These boys are coming. Please give them information on how to set up a brewery." Right? So we went there, but this is the government departments, right? They function the way like they like to function, and there is no accounting for things, I would think, right? So it took us forever just to get basic information on how a microbrewery is set up because there was only one in Maharashtra. So nobody had any clue as to what was the requirement, but it took us a while, a good 3, 4 months just to get that information out. But the policy was not conducive to setting up something in the metropolitan region, right? So the excise department had a policy which said, go ahead and create microbreweries. But the moment you said, I want to create one, they wanted a BMC clearance. And BMC would say, listen, in the metropolitan region, I'm not letting you put up a polluting industry, not knowing that a microbrewery is less polluting or probably equally, polluting as a restaurant, as small as that, right? So
Really?
the pollution board, yeah, it's small. Microbreweries are tiny things. They make about 300, 400 liters a day, right? So the pollution board wouldn't give us the clearance, the BMC wouldn't give us the clearance. So then we went back to the department. We worked with a few people, the seniors over there. We reasoned with them. We gave them information from across different countries. It took us a good year and a half, and finally they changed the policy. They said, you can set up a brewery in an industrial area and you can keg your beer and you can sell it to various bars and restaurants. And during that time, they also changed the other policy, which was you can set up a restaurant brewery in metropolitan region, the Mumbai metropolitan region. So we started writing the business plan in 2011, formed the company in November 2011, and we sold our first beer in January of 2014, right? So few things we have to learn from this. One, it is extremely frustrating working with government departments. Two, liquor is all the more frustrating because we fall under the Prohibition Act. We do not drink beer or alcohol. Alcohol is a big taboo in this state and this country for that matter. And it is a joyride or it is the highs and the lows of, meeting with departments, getting approvals, getting things done, right, can really disturb your mind. And then you have to have enough money to kind of back you up for those 2 years, 2.5 years of struggle or 3 years of struggle. And I know quite a few other microbreweries who came after us. I helped a few of them. Most of them have struggled for at least a year, if not more. And it's a Herculean task to set up a small business in this state. We do business not because the government helps us. We do business because we want to do business. If somebody sensible was around, they say, listen, are you mad? Pack your bags and leave this country or this state and get doing something somewhere else. So it's a Herculean task, I would say. So it's a challenging, roller coaster ride.
And there are many licenses, I would presume, right?
Well, yeah, there are licenses, and every license has its own timeline or babu line or whatever you want to call it. One very interesting or very depressing or sad anecdote is this: we needed to have a police clearance, right?
Right.
Because we're getting an alcohol production license. So we went to the commissioners or whatever the office was, local office over here, and the guy asked us for 25,000 rupees just to give us the clearance. And we didn't
Hmm.
have money. And we said, we don't have money. We cannot give you. You want to come and have some tea down with us? We can do that. But he said, no, I won't give it to you. But every other paperwork was stuck. It wasn't moving. So 3 months later, he was transferred. So we got a clearance from some other gentleman who had come along, right? So it's an exercise in frustration getting things done at a small level. So if you're a small enterprise, small or micro enterprise, and that too in the real world in terms of manufacturing and services, things can get very difficult.
Okay. And
Yeah.
talk to me about the food. Talk to me about the food. Talk to me
Huh.
about the flavors. And what are some of the interesting things that you've actually brewed?
So the number of recipes we started with, a Hefeweizen, which is a classical German style wheat beer, and this recipe I learned from a Chinese lady who sold us equipment. Right? We at the end of the day when we got our equipment, part of it, we were like, shit, she screwed us over. But going back in time, I see that White Zen, which is our flagship brand, was developed because she told me, use a certain temperature for fermentation, right? So I think, whatever wrong they've done us, they kind of redeemed themselves by letting me make a beer which is loved by everybody. So that's a classic wheat beer we make. We also make a darker version of the same beer, which is also another classic, which is a Dunkelweizen, and we call it Doppelganger. And then we have, an IPA. IPA is an India Pale Ale. It's a beer which is richer, more flavorful, malty. It has, good hints of bitterness, aroma of, tropical fruits and pine and various other aromatic compounds. So these are the three main beers we make, and then we keep experimenting with various things. So, for example, for Bombay Canteen, we made a beer using Darjeeling black tea and Earl Grey, right? So they used
Wow.
to release it. They used to release it every year for the anniversary, and we called it Darling G, right? So it went very well with Bombay Canteen, and they loved the beer. We did something called Kapi Stout by using coffee from, Chikmagalur, and we bought it from Blue Tokai guys. So it was lovely to have, something which is local, yet something which is international and infused together to create a new, beautiful beverage. We made something in Diwali using cardamom and saffron, right? So all your mithais in Diwali have those two spices. And we
Yeah.
made a beer called, Festival. And we kind of served it with a silver leaf on top. So if you had a sip, you would probably feel that you've had, a bite of a mithai, the aftermath, the after flavors. It wasn't as sweet, but the flavors that lingered were, the mithai flavors. We've done things with cucumber, and we've done things with gin extracts. We've done things with beetroot. So we made a beer which was called, what was it called? Beets have been slain, dead beet ale, right? So it was red in color, earthy, and after fermentation, you get a lot of berry notes from that particular fruit, particular vegetable. So a lot of these crazies happen because one, reading about what other breweries are doing. Two, I like to cook, right? So when I cook or when I go to the vegetable market or vegetable stall, I like to see what's there, and I keep thinking, can I put this in this, and what will be the end result? So that leads to a lot of different flavors and different styles. Then we brainstorm with a lot of restaurateurs, right? For Darlingji, we were sitting and brainstorming with the owners. What was their thought? What kind of beer would work for their particular consumers and restaurant? We make a beer for Woodside in every single year. For the beer and burger festival that happens in July and August, right? So we start the tasting session in January and start having discussions so that the beer is conceptualized and produced and delivered in July. Now, unfortunately, this year, the January tasting sessions got postponed because people were busy. The Feb got postponed, and after that, no other session happened. So I'll have to pull something out of my creative hat and deliver something in July if we do open and start operations.
Right. Now, when you talk to an onophile, he will talk a lot about,
Mhm.
which kind of wines will go with what kind of food and stuff like that. How does
Hmm.
beer work?
See, there is a level of sophistication you can get into with beer as well, right? In fact, beer offers a wider choice, of flavors and colors, and hence a wider array of pairing is possible. For example, wine, you would have red wine, white wine, then you'd have rosé, then you have obviously all the vintages, and you'd have sparkling and non-sparkling, and maybe a few other varieties in
Right.
there, right? In beer, you have a choice of white colored beers, and the entire spectrum of colors going up to absolutely dark black, right? So you have your dark beers that go very well with dessert. So you can have a stout with, a chocolate cake or a black forest cake, or you can just take a piece of dark chocolate and have stouts. So we, like I said, we released a Kapi stout, which was a stout made with coffee from Chikmagalur, and we served it with a piece of bitter chocolate, and it was a beautiful pairing. So you ate the chocolate, and you had the coffee stout, and you had the chocolate. It kind of complemented each other. Now, Darling Tea, it's a very, there's a tea, underlying tea flavor to it. So Bombay Canteen came up with the idea of serving it with a khari biscuit, right? So pairings are possible, and pairings are, work very well with beer as well. But beer is a, it's not an expensive drink, firstly. So, we kind of believe that, listen, whatever works for you, do that. beer is great as a refresher. Beer is great to kind of wash your palate down, and beer is great to complement flavors as well. And then obviously there are classical suggestions, like I said, dark beers you can do with stouts and stuff. You can do with chocolate, and you can do with dessert, or even richly roasted and caramelized meats and vegetables. Light beers go very well with fish. You could eat them with, you could have them with salads, because the light, the aromatics of the salad dressing kind of would complement the malty light character of the lighter beers as well. And the amber hues kind of go both ways. If you have something which is rich in, say, a brown sauce or something, you could do an amber beer to go
Wow.
along with that.
Now, in India, mostly when people have liquor, it's you have a lot of liquor and then you have
Hmm.
your food. So it's not like you have it with your
Right.
food or after or before or you know how does that vary? I mean, do you see a pattern here in the restaurant as well?
See, I think a lot of people, at least many of my friends, see, it's also the age thing, I would think. When you're in college, you tend to drink a
Yeah.
lot and then eat, right? You're partying, you're hanging out, you're drinking one after the other, and then you end up eating somewhere, late at night. As you probably grow older, you're like, okay, I've had a drink. I understand what lining the stomach means. I understand that I shouldn't get tipsy and fall down. So you say, okay, let me have a bite or two with it, right? So I think it's also one is age, one is maturity. These things play, a critical role. But by and large, yes, a lot of people do tend to drink three or four drinks and then say, "Abhi khana khayenge." But I don't think that's the right way to do it. Have a drink, have a two, probably have two drinks, feel a little tipsy, but eat a bit along with it. So you can one drink a few extra drinks, two not get so high, and three, not wake up with a hangover the
Perfect.
next day.
And like they say, you should never mix your drinks. Can you mix your beers?
I mix all the beers and I mix all the drinks, right? So I'm not a subscriber to this don't mix your drinks. I haven't even looked at the science of it because for me it's absolutely okay. I could have a beer, and if somebody gave me a whiskey cocktail to try, I'd probably have a few sips of that, go back to a beer. If I got fed up of beer or had too many today and I don't want to drink any more beer, I'd probably have something which is soda based the next day or mix it also. So I don't have a problem with mixing. I think it's a quantum that kind of kills people. For example, if you have a glass of beer, which is say 500 ml, beer usually people
Yeah.
tend to quaff. At least I tend to do that. A lot of people will sip beer like wine, and I tell them, "What the hell are you up to?" So beer is like take a big gulp, another gulp, and third gulp, and fourth gulp, right? But 500 ml will give you at least what 6 or 8 big sips, right? Now, if I give you a large whiskey with soda or a large whiskey with water, it's probably going to be no more than 250 ml, right? And if you start drinking that like beer, right, for every beer you're having two
Yeah.
of those. So then the quantum of alcohol that you're consuming is very high. Secondly, beer has carbohydrates and calories, so more than a whiskey or a vodka, right? Unless they're sweetened with some sweeteners or mixers or whatever. So beer tends to fill you up also a little bit. So you don't drink that much that fast, right? And then when you mix it, you end up having hard liquor, which is in smaller quantity but more potent, and that's where everything goes wrong. So we blame that don't mix your drinks. But I'm sure there's a science behind it, but I tend to not believe that.
Perfect. Now I read now, somewhere in the news that in Maharashtra alone, you
Hmm.
guys
Yeah.
had to put about a lakh of liters of craft beer. You had to throw that away because it was nearing expiry due to the lockdown. How's that been for you?
Well, so it all started sometime in March, right? I think about 12th March was the last delivery we did, 12th or
Right.
13th March. And we were geared up for the season time. So March, April, May, and June, this is season time, right? For the industry, I think over 50%, 60% of our sales happen in these 3, 4 months. So every March, we kind of increase our production so that we can cater to the demand. And we had done exactly that. So we had about 8.5, 9,000 liters with us. And collectively, I think there are about 12 or 14 breweries in Mumbai and Pune. And most of them probably had, a similar amount of beer lying in pre-packaged or packaged form. Now, all of March, we paid electricity bills to keep the beer cold because the beer has to be, kept cold. We don't pasteurize, otherwise it gets spoiled. March went by, April went by. So, we were in mid-May and it was like, should we pay electricity for 2 months? Our beer is sitting out there. Obviously, it's lost its prime because they're unpasteurized beers, right? And if you package them in smaller format and keep them cold, they're good for another 2, 3 months. But in a large tank, you want to kind of save energy. You got to figure out what to do. So we went ahead and drained 8,000 liters, right? And many other breweries also figured out a way to either salvage some or, more or less drain about 70, 80% of it. So the sad thing is, yes, we threw away a whole lot of beer. Not only that, all the supplies sitting at various bars and restaurants have not been used since March. And fortunately, they haven't got spoiled. At least in the 2, 3 bars I went to and I tasted the beers yesterday and day before. So the beers are absolutely fine. There's no issue with them. But they're just sitting on stock. The restaurants and bars are not really opening. We aren't able to produce any more beer. We aren't able to distribute any more beer. So the new policy and the change that has come about will allow FL3s, which are these restaurants and bars, to package their beers for takeaway and delivery. But as yet, they're not able to order more beers from us. So until their stocks last, so they probably have 60, 80 liters, and that equates to about 80 to 100 bottles of beer, and that's I think about 20, 30 customers, and then the chapter closes there. So we are hoping that in July, we get to do the production and start the supplies. But it has been a very difficult time for us. We probably, a few of us will shut down, or if this hadn't come about as a savior, many of us would have, thrown in the towel and said, listen, goodbye to this business. I'm sure the F&B sector is hurting as well because they pay high rents. They have a lot of migrant laborers who've left and gone, and they sell to consumers who now probably have no money to go and spend. And the fear also has, kind of played around with their business prospects. So the next 6 months look very, very difficult for the F&B sector and as well as us because we are tied to them to a large extent. So we are pulling through, but all the reserves are over. And if things don't improve in the next 3 months, we'll have to find a way to kind of take loans and fill the holes, or call it quits and see something else to fill your pockets with.
Wow, that's a tough time. But you mentioned there's a change in regulation now, right?
Yes,
Now,
yes,
traditionally, you commercial beer has some preservative in it, and that's why it allows you to stay on the
yeah,
shelf for longer. And craft beer does not have
yeah,
that. How are you going to make sure
no.
that how does this beer travel when if it's craft but bottled?
So if it's pasteurized, obviously it will have a shelf life for at least
Right,
2 or 3 months. Now again, beer being food, if you leave it warm, something which is good for 6 months, or when the expiry says 6 months, they actually mean if it's kept cold or in a cool environment, right? Now, our temperatures go up to 36, 40 degrees and
right,
beyond also. And let's face it, we don't have cold chains and we don't have
correct.
logistical support, and even the distribution does not have a lot of cold storage. So our beers, as soon as they leave the factory, the pasteurized ones, start deteriorating. Now look at the unpasteurized ones, they have live yeast and they have a little bit of bacteria, to permissible levels or minuscule levels, right? Now the yeast also over time kept at 36, 38 degrees will start dying. And when they start dying, they leave out off flavors in the beer. And then you have a little bit of bacteria. Suppose you had something that kind of sparked a growth or some nutrition which is left behind, carbohydrates are there in beer. So some bacteria could grow, souring up the beer as well. So it's food. We have to take care of it, and if we don't, it does tend to get spoiled, and the consumer pays for it or the brewery pays for it. Then.
So what's next for you, Navin?
I'm waiting, so I'm sort of excited about this change that has come about. So I'm hoping to kind of start some sales, with 2 or 3 restaurants. Our tap room, we are kind of thinking, when and how to start that off. So it's a wait and watch sort of a game for at least the next 6 months for us. I'm not going ahead and opening, beer shops left, right, and center because obviously, one, there's no personnel. Two, nobody's working in the government departments. I think they're down to one third or one fourth the number of employees. So it's a lot of wait and watch. We've been okay with our salaries. We've done some pay cuts, but the salaries below 16, 17,000 we did not cut and we paid them in full. But quite a few of them have not come back from the villages, so that gets stopped from next month. Uh, we'll carry on for 2, 3 more months and see where it goes.
Good luck.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
and I
much.
hope to
Thank
be back at Gateway Tap Room. It was our favorite place to go. Every Friday, we found ourselves sitting over there and enjoying a meal and
you.
sampling one
Thank
of
you.
your
Thank
beers.
you so
So,
much.
yeah, hope to see you there again.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
thank you.